to the North Group, Security, Refined by Intelligence. We're here to spotlight the best practices and critical safety and security issues in today's world and provide actionable strategies that you can implement into your day-to-day operations. From the individual to organizational level, our goal is to improve your risk management and response capabilities. Thanks for spending time with us today, and here's your host.
Good morning, everybody. We've got Michael Rozin on TNG podcast here. This is going to be an awesome episode. We're going to talk with Mike Rozin with Rozin Security. Mike is a friend and a colleague in the industry and somebody who we all look up to. So we're going to get right into it. Mike, do me a favor and introduce yourself to the audience, please.
Hi, Steve, and everyone on the podcast. Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I was very much looking forward to this. My name is Michael Rozin. I'm president of Rozin Security Consulting.
Yeah, so
and I'm honored to be here.
Just so everybody's aware, yesterday was Mike's birthday, so happy. I know I got you on social media, but and just so everybody knows, Mike's the only guy I know that ran 20 miles on his birthday.
Thank you so much, Steve. You got to make those birthdays count.
He's a warrior. I'm going to think about running 20 miles on my next birthday.
There you go. That's the attitude.
Mike, do me a favor and really and don't be too humble, because you're probably one of the most humble guys I know, but really tell us about your background, because I know once we got to know each other, it was just super impressive where you've been, what you've done, where you've come from. So just do me a favor and just dive into that.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, I'll tell you a little bit of my life story. So I was actually originally born in Belarus. And at the time, Soviet Union was there, and I lived there until I was 10, 11 years old, and ultimately I moved to Israel. Belarus, I was a Jewish kid. Growing up as a Jewish kid in Belarus was, a little adverse and not very friendly. I remember the first day in my classroom where I was the only Jewish kid in the classroom, and the teacher reads our names. And you have to raise your hand and say, that's you're there. And, they get to my last name, Rozin. Of course, it's a very Jewish last name. I raise my hand, say I'm here, and the entire classroom goes, ha, 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 here's the Jew. And from that point on, it was on kind of thing. It was, there were so many people that wanted to kick my butt that I think they had to take turns, had to schedule themselves because they couldn't fit in the breaks in between. But it was basically a nonstop kind of like that experience for my first, 5 years of school in Belarus before we moved with my family. And, I think later, we're going to talk about behavior detection. And I think part of my upbringing has a lot to do with me naturally being intuitive and interested in other people and kind of predict their actions before they act. But I was not smart enough to run away from all those confrontations, I guess, at the time. And so it was quite uncomfortable first 10, 11 years there. But from there, I moved to eventually Israel. In Israel, I joined the Israel Defense Forces when it came my time. And I served in a unit called Barkan or Stinger. It's a special operations unit within Israel Defense Forces. It was interesting, and rewarding experience, being able to be on the front line of defending the state of Israel, defending my family, defending my friends. It was very real, very, very tangible function that we perform. After my service in Israel Defense Forces, I started working as a security agent at Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv, under the oversight of Israel Security Agency, Shin Bet. Shin Bet in Israel, it's, for those who don't know, it's a little bit of equivalent, maybe a combination. It performs the functions of what here would be agencies like Secret Service, FBI, NSA, FPS. In Israel, it's done under one umbrella, and the national security agency is called Shin Bet, or Israel Security Agency. I work for our protective division of Israel Security Agency, assigned as a security agent at our airport, Ben Gurion International Airport in Tel Aviv. And, you know, in essence, the work in Tel Aviv airport kind of framed the rest of my career, because the knowledge and experience that it gave me was kind of the reason for all the next phases in my life. After my work for Israeli government, I found myself completely logically in the middle of the winter in Minnesota. What I've still been questioning this whole idea, you know, when it's come to, you know, like a negative 20 degrees in the winter, I still question, what have I done? But you know, it's been also a fun ride. I first started working as a consultant with Mall of America, the largest shopping mall as you know it in the United States. And the company that owns the 555, they had a few other establishments of just that nature. And it was the right time when I started working with the Mall of America. I later became a security manager at Mall of America. It was the right time because Mall of America was just looking to innovate because of some of the severity of the type of threats they started experiencing. And they were concerned that, you know, they were not doing enough, right? They wanted to get ahead of a potential problem. They did not want to be another target of a disaster and catastrophe like 9/11 was. And so they, you know, they thought, what could they do, right? And what could they do differently in an environment as challenging as Mall of America was, which was open to the public, you know, 30 to 40,000 people is a slow day, you know, over 200,000 people could be a busy day in Mall of America, with you know, events happening every single day, amusement park, and you name it. It's not a typical mall in essence. It's an attraction, it's an entertainment complex, it's a symbolic venue because of its name. It's all what we stand for, you know, the capitalism at its core, right? It's kind of like displayed through Mall of America. So there's multiple venues, and my work at Mall of America, it was, you know, it would give me the opportunity to take the methods that we have used in Israel for over 30 years at that time, 40 years, and apply them and develop them in environment like Mall of America, right? I quickly learned that some of the practices we use in Israeli government systems cannot be completely replicated cannot be replicated in the United States, and definitely cannot be replicated in a private setting like Mall of America, where the rules, regulations, expectations, the contextual norm of everything is so much different. But yet the principles that I was taught and used so well, I think, and so effectively while working in Israel worked, and they work so well. And so I took the principles and I started developing them and testing them out. And I was able to put together, with the help of a number of colleagues and my partners from Mall of America and local law enforcement agencies and FBI, able to put together a program at Mall of America that it's a behavior detection program, develop a unit, stands for RAM, risk assessment and mitigation. It's still active and very successful until today. And that unit and the work it performed, it proved itself quite effective in a relatively short amount of time, because it was able to identify and intervene and prevent potentially, you know, very disastrous events that could have transpired there, which of course attracted the attention of local law enforcement agencies, of intelligence community. And so I started working closer with agencies like the FBI and others. And from there, you know, they started inviting me to speak to different events, and I wonder why they do that. You know, there's a guy with a bad accent, can hardly speak English, and yet they invite me to speak to public. I said, you know, guy, you sure? I even suggested they put some subtitles from time to time. But they did, and from that kind of mode, you know, people start reaching out, other organizations, other municipalities, other law enforcement agencies, asking for advice, asking for training. You know, I at first I opened the company, right, Rozin Security Consulting, just because, you know, FBI was bringing me here and there, and that resulted sometimes in people wanting me to pay me some money. So I figured I better have some name out there registered in the state of Minnesota that will justify that additional side income. And that's how Rozin Security Consulting happened to be. And just a year after doing that, it got so busy. That was the 2011. that I decided in 2012 to jump in full force in this world of running and operating your own business, and have been in it ever since. And it's been the most invigorating, the most fun, the most challenging, now 8 years of my life, but I love every single minute of it. And I can tell you a little bit more about it as we, I think, unfold this. But in addition to operating Rozin Security Consulting, I am also an instructor. I teach. I'm a course director today at University of Minnesota. I teach at Masters of Science and Security Technologies program. I teach a course dedicated to applying the security methods in a wide area of environments, using the psychology as a way to create a very effective security program, conducting risk assessments, managing risk, and truly giving students a very practical experience rather than a completely academic experience. I'm also a special deputy with Hennepin County Sheriff's Office here in Minnesota. I am also an instructor with Krav Maga Worldwide, where I teach Krav Maga very often, and I volunteer a few other places. So that's kind of in a nutshell, so to speak, a little bit about me.
Yeah, very, very impressive. So, I mean, coming from one of the most premier national security agencies early on in your career, I mean, some of the folks that I've met from both law enforcement, the intelligence community, the counterterrorism community from your country are literally some of the best in the business. You guys, I mean, God bless you guys. You guys do so much risk mitigation in a world that's on fire all around you. So, I mean, hats off there, right? Nothing but some of the best professionals I've ever met in my life have come out of your guys' communities. So
thank you.
And thanks for all your service there. And thanks for bringing all that experience here to America. And I mean, you're a patriot. You are truly an American patriot now. I mean, we have some great conversations, and everybody that knows you says the same thing. So thanks for that. Tell me a little bit about, you've got two very unique programs. So you go into this entrepreneurial role, you take an expertise like a lot of us have, and you build a business, never expecting it to get where it's got. But you didn't just build a consultancy. You've built an RMR model. I mean, you've built training packages that really have made a difference in our national security. So do me a favor, talk about Saira and talk about tips, if you will, whatever one you want to cover down on first.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you, Steve. And I have to say, United States. Israel, it will always be part of my DNA. And I love and support Israel with everything I have. And when I got to the United States, right, this is a new discovery for me, and I love this country. I really do. I think the freedom here, what it stands for, it's truly unbelievable. And I think for me, maybe because I lived in a number of different countries where you did not have that freedom, you not have this opportunity, do not have that liberty to do what you want to do and achieve your potential, right? I think people that don't have that experience, I think it's a little too easy, too fast to complain. But really, United States is a great, fantastic place to be. I love it, and I'm certainly humbled and honored that I can be proud of it, and now call myself a United States citizen. So thank you for that. Now, SIRA, right, stands for Suspicion, Indicators, Recognition, Assessment. And it's, in essence, the reason why I'm in the business. And I'll explain you all the mechanics, but I have to say, right, it's nothing more rewarding. This is a program that is geared towards preventing violence, preventing planned act of violence, and stopping aggressors before they're able to do what they do. And there's a lot of, like, you can do a lot of theoretical stuff in life, but sometimes in our world, right, security, as you know, not many times it's rewarding, because the things you do, right, and you're doing well, you don't get to experience the satisfaction of, right, your work. I I have to say I'm blessed, and I maybe I'm lucky, and this is really why we're on the business and very motivated in my team to do what we do, is really because of the SIRA program at the end of the day, because our clients, a number of them, call us, and it's those calls that you get every so often that makes your day, it makes your year sometimes. When you have a client calls you back and is crying on the phone and is telling you how appreciative they are because this program saved lives. It identified the aggressor. It helped him prevent the attack. It opened a counterterrorism investigation. It put real bad guys behind bars. And that's really what this is all about. This is why we're working around the clock really to make this work. So what this is, right? What is SIRA? First, right? So the principles, right, of SIRA come from over 40 years of field work and aired trials from the Israeli government, right? In Israel, you mentioned right earlier that you say we are one of the best in the industry, and thank you for that. And I think for us, it is the threat in Israel from the very beginning of the time that Israel became a country, right? The threats, the very existential threats of existence, have been part of our life. And so when there's no, I always say, right, there's no option for you to fail. When a failure is not an option, it is amazing how good you can become at something. And that's really kind of why we are prompted to innovate and research and approach security a little differently. So SIRA is a concept that allows trained security professionals, trained law enforcement professionals, to proactively identify potential threat actors, assess them as such, intervene, and ultimately mitigate planned acts. And it's a combination. The skills that you are learning through SIRA is the process of recognition of potential threat elements in a wide different area of environment, whether it's open environments like an airport, sport games, mass transit, or a little more controlled environment like an office building, a school setting, more protected facilities like oil refineries, energy sector, and more. And the idea is you are taught, security professionals are taught how to recognize proactively indicators of someone intending to cause harm. They're able to effectively assess and discern those that pose a threat versus those that do not, and from there apply the right action. One of the most effective parts of the SIRA program is that it makes a security operation highly dynamic because it builds hunters. Once instituted, the trained personnel are motivated, they're eager, and the mechanism behind it forces the security personnel to actively hunt. It's kind of like, I compared it, if you think about a Secret Service, professionals who are protecting their protectees, their assets as event or venue, whatever they might be, and they're actively hunting, right? They're actively searching and hunting for any cue that someone in the audience or next to the might be potential threat actor. It's that kind of mindset that SIRA creates, but it makes it a permanent mindset. So you act not only when you're at this venue or this event or the high risk situation, but you hunt literally all the time while you're on duty. And that kind of hunting makes it very effective. Second thing that SIRA does, we teach this process of threat assessments through conversation, right? We call this process security interview. And it's a very friendly, polite, professional, very sharp interaction that is highly effective. And it's a nightmare on steroids for individuals that have something to hide right then and there. Because the questions are they are friendly and playful and nice, but they are going to the core of your intent so quick, and they're so effective that they make the person who does not, even if you do expect, but do not expect it, make it very difficult to survive this interview if you're planning to carry a malicious act.
I just know from sitting on the other side of a table when we first met with you that it is intimidating. I don't get intimidated, but it is Practically questioned by Mike Rozin. Just so our listeners are aware, if you get the opportunity, put yourself through it. I'm sorry, Mike. I just had to add that.
Thank you. Yeah. Sorry, my intention was not to intimidate on Matt. It was a great meeting at that. But we get to the core of it pretty quick, right? Yeah. So that's a very effective part of this process is this conversation. And there's a lot of systems out there and programs and training that talk about recognition of suspicion, indicators, recognition of things in the field. Recognizing indicators on the field, right, with a little bit of experience and know-how, it's not little rocket science, right? Most people can do it. Most people that are interested in doing it can do it. But the question is, rather, what those indicators, right? Without context behind it, sometimes could mean nothing, or many times could be overacted for no reason. It's what you do with those indicators. How do you assess them? How do you do it in a short amount of time? And how do you act properly to address the relevant risk in front of you? It's kind of like eliminate this same security for all type of strategy. It's a risk-based approach, right? Where people that pose low to no risk, right? There is no reason, right, to conduct extensive or more security scrutiny on them. But those that display indicators of potential risk, they deserve a lot more focus on and a lot more effort. So that's a little bit of SIRA, right? It's a training program that over the years we have packaged specific training courses geared for law enforcement, for special operations units within law enforcement, for Department of Defense and military units as they're being deployed to hostile environments. Programs geared specifically for those applications. Program gears for protective needs of both law enforcement, military units. We have a specific program geared towards suicide bombers that teaches law enforcement organizations how to structure teams that are capable of recognizing and acting and mitigating effectively potential suicide bomber threats, as well as we have a program for private sector, program for corporate security organizations, for security corporations that protect a variety of different assets. And so we have different level of programs. We're able to license some of these programs for private sector partners. And so that's a little bit of SIRA. We also offer now very regular trainer courses where we certify a number of instructors. I look at here at the list, kind of preparing for this podcast, and we have thousands. We have thousands of people that we have certified at this point. It's really a miracle. And we have hundreds of instructors throughout the world spread out. We have qualified instructors teaching our program in Asia, in India, in Greece, in France, and UK. In the United States. So it's really, the concept has been growing significantly here over the years. So that's a little bit of SIRA.
Yeah. And just for our listeners, right? My intent, it's a time thing. My intent's to go through this. My intent's to have our staff go through this. If you're in the industry, I mean, everything I've heard and those I've talked to that have been through it just have told me, I mean, it really, especially if you're a tactician or a practitioner in this industry, it really opens your mind further. So let's talk about evaluating threats, because this is something like I'm super excited about, because I know that you eat, breathe, and sleep this. And I don't think, to me, passion drives results more than experience, right? If you're passionate about, finding a threat, if you're passionate about that, and I think, one thing with listeners, and practitioners in our industry, whether they're EP agents, whether they're Secret Service agents, whether they're criminal investigators, I think the thing is, a lot of people's interest is we have a passion to be here. We have a passion to get that 2 a.m. phone call and respond to a threat. We love that. I know you love that. I'm the same way. I love that. Talk to me about evaluating the threats. I mean, client calls, let's stick with the high net worth client, right? Because I think a lot of people, or the corporate client, and there's an active threat towards their ecosystem. I mean, talk me through the steps, Mike. Talk me through how does how does your firm evaluate that? I mean, give me kind of the down and dirty.
Yeah, thank you. So, we have spent, our company has spent a significant amount of our time, and I think you probably will question us about, those guys are not quite with it, but we spend a lot of our time studying bad guys. We do. Every new case of interest that perks up, we research it, we analyze it, we dissect it. We, whenever we can, we're trying to get down to a level, get to as close as we can to the perpetrator. Whether we're talking to their lawyer, we're talking to the agent that handled the case. Sometimes we're trying to get to the actual perpetrator and have a conversation with him or her. And so we are really dissecting because, I think the way we look at it, and I'll tell you a little bit about our methodology. We have developed our own methodology, how we approach and tackle the threat assessment process. But I discovered that, hypothetical thinking is nice, and hypothesis is a good thing, right? It kind of creates new ideas. It makes you think outside the box. But it's the practical application of this that makes all the difference. And the practicality of it comes from the bad guys, right? I mean, we are in a business to try to, predict bad guys. And threat assessment is a intelligence-based guess at the best, right? And so we're trying to narrow this gap, right? Narrow this gap by going back, right, and identifying trends that we can rely on. And we can say, after looking at those 100 threat actors, we see the same exact thing happening over and over and over again, right? And we ask the questions, like, why is this happening, right? Why do those 100 plus perpetrators have to do the exact same thing over and over and over again before they care to act? Is that because there's some sort of like a common understanding of of the things you say, the things you do before you care to act? Is it or is it because of the necessity? And generally, when we are able to categorize people by their profiles, right? What kind of profile this person fits, and the kind of action they're there to commit, and what are the common steps, the common things that transpire when you are a certain profile committed to a certain type of action. Those trends is that we use when we evaluate threats. So our predictions, right? And again, it's a guess, right? So anyone who does threat assessments out there and tells you that they know exactly and precisely to that they can say, this is going to be a high threat, low threat individual. Anyone that claims any kind of 100% of any threat assessment thing is maybe overstating at best, and or just simply not telling the truth, because the threat assessment at its core is a guess. It's intelligence-based guess. It's always easy to look back. In hindsight is 20/20 always, but look forward is a bit different. So the process that we apply is we look at the profile of our potential target, right? The client. What is the target profile? What is the level of attractiveness to this target profile? What is the threat actor? When we know of a specific threat actor, that makes our job easier. When we don't know, we try to predict who are the threat actors that are mostly attracted to this type of profile. We take a look at specific intention and operational capability that these threat actors might have demonstrated in the past. And then we associate with the trends that we have seen, that we learn firsthand from the bad guys, and compare it to what has been seen here. And we have our own both qualitative and kind of quantitative system that helps our clients visualize where they are at on our prediction scale. And we always are very careful to say that this is a prediction, right? And predictions are got to take them for what they are. And so you always want to caution on the side of safety in that regard. But a combination of those factors is we develop our own kind of proprietary methodology that we use to predict threats against individuals versus organizations. The organizational threat assessment is a little different.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just fascinating. I could talk for hours on this. It's kind of, again, it's passion, right? It's a problem to solve. We're in a dynamic landscape right now. The threat landscape for our potential customers mutually is just unique. And we've had these conversations about, different opportunities that we've worked on together in whether it's workplace, whether it's high net worth. What, I've got my thoughts on this, but what is your assessment right now of what our potential clients' threat landscape? What are they facing? Both on the corporate side, the enterprise side, but the private high net worth side, the family office side. Because I don't think, and this is just me throwing this out there, I don't think there's a disconnect between threats. I think there's a connection between the threat matrix that are existent right now. But what is your assessment of that? And I know landscapes have changed, but kind of let our listeners understand what we're seeing from the high level perspective.
I think when we're looking at the current threat landscape, it is important to kind of classify maybe pre-COVID-19 and the current COVID-19 era, and there's a reason for that, right? So the threats that existed, right, when we're taking a look at organizations from a business standpoint, of course, different organizations have different level of threats. The common threats that we see when it comes to violence, of course, we always had that threat of idiosyncratic motivated type attacks. We have seen an unprecedented spike in workplace violence cases, right, that have been raging through this country, right? We have seen also unprecedented spike in active shooting incidents when it comes to educational institutions, businesses, mass gatherings for numerous of idiosyncratic reasons. The threat of terrorism, right, it has not gone away, right? It's very much here, and this country has to be very grateful and appreciative of what the federal government is doing day to day, because some of my friends and colleagues at the Bureau are heroes. They're literally heroes. They're stopping and saving American lives every day, because the damage that the self-proclaimed, as they call them, self-proclaimed Islamic State was able to do is one of their probably long-lasting impact, but not everyone is talking about it. It's less about the territorial control in Iraq and Syria. It's more about the brand and the power behind the brand that they were able to establish, and the motivation behind it, and the drive that makes people who don't even know how to spell Islamic State within a week or two are able to take a gun or a knife or try to construct a small explosive device and try to go and kill people, because they now find the power, right? And they find association and affiliation with this message that the story that the self-proclaimed Islamic State sends. And my personal perception, like the self-proclaimed Islamic State, the leaders behind it, they are cowards who lost their sense of humanity. And of course, it's easy, right, to put others to a task and try to carry the act. But I think we should not dismiss that. We should not forget that this threat is very, very real, and the spikes in a number of cases that the federal government is handling over the last couple of years, when it comes to terrorism landscape, is also unprecedented to this country.
Yeah, just to add to that, right? We were our COO and I were talking this morning, and he's a retired career, CT guy, spent his entire career chasing down AQ and things like that. And we were talking about Pensacola and how all this information's coming out, with the connection between the Saudi Arabian Peninsula and the shooter and AQ from the region and all that. I think that you're absolutely right. And I think, Daesh, I won't even call them, ISIL, I'll call them Daesh, but they are the epitome of they just radicalize from afar, but they won't fight our forces head on. I will say, I'll give the warrior respect to Al Qaeda and the Taliban. I mean, they'll face us on the battlefield. Daesh won't. They won't. They run like cowards. They're not even warriors. They won't even. So I think that is a great threat we face, and I think we've lost focus as individual Americans, right, on that threat still exists, that the radicalization, the rumors and echoes of the radicalization occurring 2-3 years ago, there are still people that haven't stepped out of radicalization and became operational yet, but they do have the potential to go operational any day.
Exactly. Yeah, and so let me kind of unpack it from a standpoint of what happens now in this COVID-19 era, right? From a threat standpoint, like if we break down by those threat actors, right? We have let's focus on those three main categories of threat actors and how that relates to organizations and high net worth individuals. So on one side, we have criminals. We have what I call idiosyncratic threat actors, individuals that carry attacks for any variety of personal reasons. That's majority of active shooting incidents in the United States that come from. And then you have motivated, radicalized, inspired by terrorism propaganda, homegrown violent extremists on one side, on another side. So kind of zeroing those three general buckets, right? HVEs, homegrown violent extremists, idiosyncratic threat actors, and criminals. Now, starting kind of from the worst, I think we have seen already the messaging, the kind of pivot in what's happening just through a number of communication channels, that the terrorist perpetrators, especially, right, the coward Daesh, as they call them, they see that right now the West, United States, the West, they are especially fragile because of the COVID-19, right? The economy of United States, the economy of the West is the economy blanket, so to speak, is very fragile, and it doesn't take much now, not only to break the economy, but I think during those uncertain, it's the uncertainty that creates this fragility. But during those uncertain time, it's not taking too much to create more havoc and further break the overall society and the structure. And I'm generally concerned that they will attempt to leverage this in one shape and form, right? This economic uncertainty and unpredictability. Can you imagine, right, a series of attacks at that time with a proper political and ideological focus? That could be devastating to this country. It could be absolutely devastating if you know how to play the right political extremes along with that. It could be devastating. It could be devastating to the West. And I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid that, and I hope that they are not able to organize, they're not able to carry it, and the intelligence community continues to perform as they are. But I don't doubt for a second that they are sitting there and contemplating what and how they can capitalize on this current situation that the West is struggling with. How can they take advantage of that? I have no doubt that they're sitting and contemplating, and if not, or to put some plans in action of what to do with that. So it's a serious prospect, and we got to think about it from that standpoint. The second threat actor in this post-COVID-19 era is the idiosyncratic threat actors, the individuals that carry attacks for personal grievances. There too, I am very concerned, of what happens next, because all of this, because of the situation, a lot of people are losing their jobs. We see unemployment rate going up every day. Some companies are closing, and even if we start reopening, it's not certain, right, how quickly the economy will bounce back. It's not certain how many jobs will pop up again. And because of that, because of this uncertainty, it poses a lot of stress on individuals. Add to that, right, the COVID-19 crisis, of course, got politicized heavily in the United States and other countries. And now you have extremes on both sides, the right and the left, that keep fueling this. Media does not help this at all. All those factors create additional stressors and additional motivators for people to carry those acts of violence. And so I think what we have seen before COVID-19, I think it's going to get multiplied significantly as we start going back to semi-normal and operating. People that lost their jobs, people that have seen this crisis as some political conspiracy, people that see this left or right, people that are emotionally now unstable because of the situation. We're bound to see more issues. That is no doubt in my mind. And the third notion there of criminals, every time the economy is down, right, and the crime opportunities, right, the crime grows, right. So it's always all the match. So I have no doubt that the crime will keep growing. Now, when it comes to specifically the one aspect that I haven't mentioned is the high net worth individuals, especially those individuals in high net worth that have, they're not only high net worth, but they have a high public profile. They are publicly recognized. I think those individuals, my suggestion is to now is a good time to take a close and some proactive look at their security posture, because as the more things are getting uncertain and the more idiosyncratic threat actors, as they call them, become motivated to carry acts, many times, right, the source of money, right, the source of potential, like, it's there, those people fault become the high net worth, high profile individuals. So that's my perception.
So yeah, the threats facing the high net worth, I totally concur with what you're saying there. I think that what we're calling a self-risk assessment. Everybody should be self-risk assessing right now. I think that uncertainty drives chaos, right? And chaos breeds a type of person that will do just about anything. And it drives those three threat actors that you just talked about to not only desperation, but advantage. I think another thing too, right? Mental health. We've been talking about the workplace violence spike when we go back to work, when all the states turn back on. Now you've got, Bob, who doesn't want to be on the factory floor. He's been getting paid for 2 months, and now he's being told he's got to go back and
exactly
nuts and bolts on the cars over here at the assembly plant. And Bob's been drinking for months. Bob doesn't want to quit drinking. I mean, it takes 15 days to get a drinking problem consistently, right?
Yeah.
It takes 10 days to get addicted to hard drugs. And then it takes, 40 to 60 days to go into rehab. What the effects of mental health, how do you feel that that's going to start affecting, our corporate clients that we service, right? And the workplace violence issues that we respond to?
Yeah. And that's a very good point, Steve. I totally see, I'm completely in line with you. And I think when I say that I expect a potential increase in those idiosyncratic threat actor motivated activities, that's exactly what I refer to, is people in the workplace. That's a good example. People distraught by the situation, people mental health being impacted, people perceived sense of stability being impacted, which will cause, and that definitely will cause, turbulence. And turbulence causes those chaotic kind of actions that we see materializing. So that's a very serious proposition. I think next year, right, as schools and universities get to reopen, the summer could be very turbulent for many families who lost their jobs, who their economic situation has downgraded. And as we start returning back to schools, and in addition to stressors, the typical stressors from schools, the typical mental health problems that we see that many times cause those mass acts of violence, that additional COVID-19 related problems will only exaggerate and make, I think, unfortunately, will make more problems in our country and our school system as well.
How is to digress for a second here, how has COVID affected your business? I'm guessing the answer is positive than negative.
Yeah, we've been so busy. We've been very busy, actually. And I think, part of it, the one part that maybe it directly affected is that the training, our SIRA training programs, right, that we generally deliver in person in the classrooms, right, with, we are, because of the uncertainty of COVID-19 so far, we had to postpone and cancel, push back to the second half of the year. So there was some impact there. But on the, that at the same time, that forces us a little bit to innovate and, see how we can deliver part of the training remotely, part of the training in person, that it feels safe for people. So some good come out of it, no doubt. But, the other side of it is, I think the consulting side is where we've been really busy. there's been, a lot of companies follow our advice, take up proactive action. They want to evaluate their risks right now. They want to commit to protective measures because they also understand that on the end of this COVID-19 problem, there will be an increase, there'll be likely increased security risks. And so because of that, we've been quite busy, both with high net worth individuals and families, with those corporations and government.
So when you're, these customers during this time, right? I think our listeners, right? Because I know a lot of providers that are suffering, right? I mean, we've done fairly well during this time, like you guys. I mean, we lost our event work. I mean, that's huge, right? Stadiums, events, all of that. I mean, we lost quite a bit of that, and that sucks. But with that, we've gained a lot of other traction in other areas, on the consultancy side as well. What do you think, with our current customer landscape, what are you telling customers, both on like the stadium side, when they open back up? I mean, what risks do they face? I mean, because you've got decontamination. That's going to be a big deal. But you also, I mean, things can't stay closed forever. So as we open stadiums back up, as we open, I mean, Las Vegas is huge, right? As we open Las Vegas back up, is our security posture going to be diminished because it's not on the forefront of our mind? I think COVID might be a distraction. I don't know. Kind of talk us through that. What are you thinking? I mean, with sports stadiums, public event spaces, I mean, what does it look like when we open back up from a security posture standpoint?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a good point you bring in. I had some conversations with some of our clients, security managers, directors from some, and you could tell, right, that right now, of course, the number one priority for just about any, which is it's interesting, but security many times is find themselves now in being the central point for dealing with COVID-19 measures, right? And so the number one priority is the masks and PPEs and what and how they do it and the distancing. And, and I had to, several times here, I had to slow them down a little bit and say, look, I understand, right, everything that you guys are doing here and how important it is for the business to be able to operate in this COVID-19 era. This is no doubt critical for you guys. But, I don't remember the core security reasons you're here, because the threats after things start going back to open, I think will only grow. And I think the events that we're going to see will multiply. My prediction is that the security industry will be extremely busy when things start going back to normal. And because of that, some of my clients are listening to us, to our advice, and we're planning for it now, right? We're putting together measures, right? We're starting with assessment to very specific program executions. We're putting together measures that, COVID-19 problem aside, that are helping our clients to be prepared to proactively counter more significant issues that are likely to arise as a result of this uncertainty.
Yeah. I think it's something we've really got to keep an eye on, right? I think that where there's weaknesses in our respective planning as a community, as a security provider, there will be people to take advantage of that. Stephen Paddock's a great example of that, right? I mean, he took advantage of placement and access to the Route 66, venue to pull off his attack, and that's tragic. That's a great case study for all of us to learn from a risk liability standpoint. What could happen? I mean, MGM just suffered from that ordeal, corporately and their stakeholders, so it's a big deal. What about from a recommendation standpoint, what are we as industry leaders going to recommend to our clients right now, when it comes to identifying their risk profile? You may have an individual family office that's a $50 million family office, right? They haven't really thought about this. maybe they struck, gold in the market here, and now they're up, 70%. They're $100 million family office, and they really got to start considering their risk profile. What do you recommend to these people to identify? What should they be doing to look at their risk profile and start to understand what key steps they can take first?
Yeah, so I think just from experience, I think that you have to, for clients like this, you have to break it down into two phases. One phase is take a look at their residences and their families and themselves, because many times they expose themselves to unnecessary risks by not vetting the people that are closest to them, by not committing to discipline security measures online and social media, by not thinking about security when it comes to their residences and what happens around their residences, inside their residences, by not planning for security risks when it comes to home-related problems. And so I think it's important for them to take a close look at their own personal lives and people that are closest to them, that work with them, their staff members, service member, contractors, their children. Children, many times, are one of the biggest vulnerability for those kind of families. And the security of those children, the procedures that the schools deploy, right? The onboarding and offboarding when they're picked up and being dropped, the verification of the students when they leave the premise of the school. How does that transpire? We find a lot of vulnerability in those areas. The second one is, of course, take a look at their workspaces and their organizations, right? From the same standpoint, take a look at the target profile, take a look at the existing measures and vulnerabilities that exist in operations, policies, procedures, protocols, training, personnel, vulnerabilities that exist in technological measures, right, that are supposed to be there or lack of, and physical measures, the physical layout design. We have been approached just over the last several months. We've been really busy in helping companies just like that develop security plans for their residences, upgrade security programs for their corporate offices, and more. So I think that's the right kind of right thought at this point in time for them to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Mike, it's always a pleasure. It really is. I love talking to you, and when this is all over, we just got to get together again and spend some time, trying to solve
Absolutely.
problems. Do me a favor. Tell our listeners how they get in touch with Rozin Security Consulting. Tell them how they reach you, how they reach the firm. Again, if I had to recommend a client to another company, you would be the company. So please just give them your.
Thank you very much for that, sir. Yeah, and I apologize. I talked too much. Time ran out. I know we didn't get to talk more about behavior analysis and how this really plays out on the field, and tips and more. And maybe we'll do another round. This is quite fun.
Yeah, no, I think we should do a whole session on an hour on just behavioral analysis. I really do. I think practitioners, providers, clients would all love to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's plan for that. But how to get in touch with us? It's relatively easy, right? You go online to www.rozin, the word security.com, rozinsecurity.com, and you can get in touch with us from there directly. We also have LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all those good things. And of course, we have my team is very responsive, so you can find us on social media platforms. You can find us directly on our website. We have a great team of top-notch professionals who take their job more than just a job, more like a mission, and they're here to do good and make an impact in life. So they take every single project, every single one of our clients as their own family, and we truly care. We truly care about everyone we work with. So it is that.
Well, listen, Mike, I appreciate your time. It's always an honor. We love working with Rozin Security Consulting. It's always an honor to work with you and pick your brain on things. Please reach out to Mike if you're new in the industry, if you have a question, behavioral detection question. Saira, great program. Try to get involved with it. We'll recommend it. You know, COVID's kind of put a damper on that, but on the other end of this, I think everybody will need Saira a little bit more, Mike. So just because of, you know, behavioral attributes. So thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. That's a wrap.
You've been listening to the North Group Podcast. We're security, refined by intelligence. If you have questions for us, they can be emailed to info@tngdefense.com or visit our website at www.tngdefense.com. Don't forget to subscribe and stay safe.